Just to get in perspective, it's double the number of the most devastating wildfires in history in the LA area that DeepSeek took off the balance sheet of NVIDIA. And they were able to innovate, even with, if you want, outdated technology and low cost to be comparable with the latest and greatest large language models. The fact that it's open, it's based on MIT open source licenses, which makes it very, very open. Very, very transparent. The inference layer, how to build applications on an open source model like that, becomes vastly cheaper than what we've seen and what companies are paying today. Yes, reasoning is for certain prompts, for certain questions, for certain enterprise use cases. I think reasoning models are better suited. They are successful in prototyping, but it's a whole different ballgame to put that into production on a 24/7 basis.
So welcome to Thomas Odenwald to the AI Outcomes podcast. Thomas, not the first time that we've met, is it? We met, gosh, what was it, 2 years ago or so over in San Jose when we were both working for your former employer and we were doing prospecting and securing early sales stage conversations with AI stakeholders. So yeah, it was a great 2 days that we spent, really fun. And we find you in Mexico, don't we, Thomas? And I think of all the things, like when I look at what I did this weekend, it's so dull. But Thomas, maybe give a little bit of an intro and what have you been doing this weekend? Because that was phenomenal.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Good morning and good afternoon. I'm in a different time zone here altogether, but great to meet again under these circumstances. And yes, I'm at my second home here in Baja California at the East Cape, trying to spend more and more time between that home and our Bay Area home. And I just mentioned to you before we started the podcast, we have whaling season here, and this is the absolute hotspot for humpback and gray whales. So it's just spectacular to go out in a kayak or on a paddleboat and just see the whales, what they do, and they're getting their young down here before they go all the way back to Alaska, and it's just such a spectacle.
Yeah, I think we did see the grey whales. We got a like a boat from Santa Barbara, I think it was, and the grey whales were making that phenomenal journey down to have their calves and then head all the way back again. So yeah, wow. Well, that's brilliant. Well, we're not here to talk about whales, though, are we, Thomas? We're here to talk about DeepSeek. So DeepSeek released their R1 product, and I guess if you measure things in Netflixes, it knocked the value of one Netflix off Nvidia's share price. So I think it took $1 trillion off their share price, I believe, in a couple of days. So it was a massive release. And what I wanted to do, I wanted to bring you on today, Thomas, to talk about DeepSeek from the perspective of enterprise customers. What is it? Why all the big kerfuffle when they launched this thing, and what's the opportunities for enterprise customers? And so we can get in some of the use cases and how it changes things. And of course, this audience is primarily B2B sales professionals who are looking to engage with customer stakeholders who will also probably be expecting the market to say, well, this is what this new technology means for you. But perhaps you could just step through. We had all of the noise, the drama in the press, but maybe if you could just step through what DeepSeek released, and then let's get in some definitions and maybe some terminology. And then we'll step through how an enterprise customer might benefit from this in the long run.
Yeah, that DeepSeek had quite an impact. So if you don't mind, Ben, before I respond to your question, a little bit about my background, just so
sure
the audience knows where I'm coming from. Way back in another life, I started as a student, actually, in Germany. I grew up in Germany. I'm a native German. I joined a company called SAP at that time because I was a student and I needed the money, and that was just a lucky strike. I spent in total 23 years with the company. Started very small. I think they were less than 300 people when I started out as an engineer. But the double lucky strike for me was that because I knew how to program at that time, and funny enough, I learned programming on punch cards. Many people don't even know what that is. You have to go to the Computer History Museum to understand what punch cards do. But because I could program, so they offered me a part-time job next to me finishing my studies. And I was part of a very small core team developing the ERP system, the Enterprise Resource Planning System, which is still, until today, this is still the flagship product of SAP as a global company. It's probably the most complex piece of software there ever was and there ever is, and it's the heartbeat of every company out there. So from an engineering background, then SAP sent me off to start the first development center outside of the US in the Silicon Valley back at that time, developing the first ever industry solution. I think nowadays they have 26 or so different industry solutions. I also was lucky to be able to start the development center in Bangalore, in India, back in the days for SAP, which is now probably over 10,000 people strong. And I ended up within SAP heading up application research back in the days. So see myself a little bit as an intrapreneur, always working on cutting edge technology. And when I left SAP, I wanted to get some startup experience. And I wanted to go into sales, funny enough, right? So I always had this thought that, and we talked about that when we met 2 years ago. With that technical background, I think I can make a difference in sales, and I think there's something to it if you have somebody with a technology background in a sales meeting. I loved working with customers, so I mingled in some startups, different kind of startups in healthcare, life cycle assessment, where our big customer at that time under Steve Jobs was Apple. I joined a supply chain company who was acquired. I had my own startup as well, doing AI very early on. But of course, we didn't have the money to pull off large language models, which we talk more about. And I had one interesting experience in a startup in the space industry as well. So we built, funny enough, we built gas stations in space, which the company was called Orbit Fab, which is still thriving. It was fantastic. I mean, we had video conferences with the astronauts in the International Space Station. I mean, it's just stunning. But the simple reason behind the success and behind the business model itself is all these satellites up there in space die when they run out of fuel. I mean, they are still technology sound, they are still up to date, but if they run out of fuel, and even to stay in the same place, they need a little bit of fuel just to adjust for gravity and other things. And our thought, and we proved that, and Elon Musk helped us to get our first gas station into space, is if we can refuel these satellites, we can double, triple, quadruple the lifespan rather than adding to the space debris, which is a huge problem up there, and it's just a matter of time until something catastrophic happens. Anyway, and then of course I joined HPE heading up AI sales back in the days where we met, and that was still early on as well in the AI space. When I left HPE, I had a quick stint in Europe with a company called Aleph Alpha. And not sure if we can talk about the geopolitical landscape when it comes to AI in this podcast. How do I say that? It was short-lived because after 25 years in the Silicon Valley, I came to the conclusion that discrepancy between those two continents in terms of AI is a little bit too much for me. Let me stop here that's a little bit about my
Yeah.
background.
No,
But
and I was just going to say on that. So it's fascinating about the satellites, and it makes perfect sense. Best business case of all time. We can refuel these things that they can continue their operation. But maybe we'll touch on Europe. There's a big conference going on right now. I was watching JD Vance talking in Europe today just about AI, and Europe desperately is trying to say, no, we're not behind, but it's pretty obvious. It's pretty obvious where the progress has been made, and of course, most recently, that's been the rug pull moment, hasn't it, for a lot of investors? I think probably people on the inside knew this, but a lot of investors saw what the Chinese companies are capable of.
So let me respond to your question before we get back to Europe at a later point. Yeah. So DeepSeek, right? A couple of weeks ago, DeepSeek made a big splash in the marketplace. You already mentioned it took $500 billion off the NVIDIA balance sheet alone, which they, to a certain extent recovered now. But just to put it into perspective, because somebody did an analysis out there and compared the total insurance cost of these devastating fires that we had in LA and totaled it up to 250 billion. So just to get in perspective, it's double the number of the most devastating wildfires in history in the LA area that DeepSeek took off the balance sheet of NVIDIA in just a day. Right or wrong, I don't want to be the judge, but a little bit to your question, a little bit about DeepSeek, where they come from. It's a Chinese company, Chinese startup company. The founder is Lang Wenfeng. I think they started out in 2023, and they released two models recently in the marketplace. The first one was V3, which is a dense model, a very generic model. I think between 600 and 700 billion parameters. And at the same time, they released another model, what's called a reasoning model called R1, comparable with OpenAI, O1, if you want, which is more leaning towards the chain of thought and the reasoning for decision making. So there's a slight difference between those two models. One more getting back the chain of thought and the principles behind the response. Might be a bit slower when it responds to you. And then, of course, the dense model that is comparable with OpenAI GPT-4, if you want. Now, they released those two models. The reason why this made such a splash in the marketplace is they claim, and I want to emphasize claim, right? Because the truth might never come out, what the full costs are behind, but we have to believe what we read and what they published, that they trained these models with just $6 million, which, if you think about it, in comparable models, like I mentioned, the OpenAI models are more than $100 million to train. So this was the big news: is how are they able to train a model that is in performance comparable with the best out there? And I mentioned the two OpenAI comparisons, but there are others as well, for just a fraction of the costs. And I think this led to this big news and what happened in the marketplace overall. My personal view on this is, yes, the costs and the innovation on the cost side, because they had to use outdated NVIDIA chips. They still used NVIDIA chips, but they had to use A100 and H800 chips rather than the latest and greatest, right? Because of the chips embargo, and they were able to innovate even with, if you want, outdated technology and low cost, to be comparable with the latest and greatest large language models in the Silicon Valley with the big players. And of course, that rattled the marketplace. Because of that rattled the venture capitalists, because now they are wondering, how do we recoup the billions of dollars that we put into our companies if they do something equivalent for a very cheap price tag? But I also believe, and that's unfortunately not discussed as much as the cost equation, the fact that it's open. It's based on MIT open source licenses, which makes it very, very open, very, very transparent. So I think this is part of what should be more in the discussion. How can we leverage the fact that DeepSeek made that in an open source mode? And on top of that, the methodologies that they used in form of what's called reinforcement learning was until now not seen on that scale. So they innovated on that front as well, and they proved to the world that based on reinforcement learning, they can now be on par with the leading models out there. So I think that's the big disruption, the big breakthrough, and of course, because of the technology behind it, because of the costs, the inference layer, how to build applications on an open source model like that becomes vastly cheaper than what we've seen and what companies are paying today with the likes of Anthropic or OpenAI or Microsoft or you name them.
Yeah, look, thank you for that, Thomas. And you've used some terms there, and I'm gonna just step back to one of those terms, which is reasoning model. So, from my kind of non-technical point of view, I find myself kind of referring to DeepSeek as a large language model, but actually, when you use DeepSeek, so I've logged into it, I've practiced using it to ask questions, and that's asking the R1 version of DeepSeek. And when you actually see a large language model doing reasoning, it's almost like it's explaining its working out for you before it gives you the answer. Then it will give you the summarized answer, whereas I'm a ChatGPT subscriber just because ChatGPT was the first large language model I saw, and I thought, wow, I need this. And so ChatGPT will just kind of give you an answer, but DeepSeek was then giving me much more of a frame around the process it was going through to come up with an answer. And as you said, it did take longer. But for business customers, how are they going to use a large language model versus a reasoning model, or is it still too early yet to even to understand that?
So my answer would be twofold on this one. Yes, reasoning is for certain prompts, for certain questions, for certain enterprise use cases. I think reasoning models are better suited because what you just said, you get the chain of thought, very transparent behind your prompt, behind your question, laid out in front of you, and you can track it back. Versus a dense model is where you give in a prompt or what's called a question, and it gives you an instant response. So depending on the use case, one might be better than the other. My response would be it's depending on the use case. Now, before we go further, just a word of caution as well on the downsides of DeepSeek. If you use the DeepSeek model as hosted by DeepSeek or whoever they chose in China by themselves, they own the data that you put in. So it's banned in many countries already. I think Italy, Australia, US now as well, banned to use the hosted version of DeepSeek. While at the same time on the App Store, it's going up towards the top spot as one of the most used apps that there are. So this whole, we have to be careful. On the one hand, there's censorship in the model itself, right? We heard about what questions DeepSeek model will not respond to if you ask about China politics. They own the data that you put in, and we've seen in the past what that could cause if you hand over proprietary or even secret data to hosted AI models. But at the same time, it's open, right? Nothing stops anybody to host the DeepSeek model on a different platform. With all the security and with all the precaution and the privacy that you require. I think Hugging Face, the latest count on Hugging Face is that there are already between 500 and 600 derivatives of the DeepSeek model that people can use and can download.
So is that individual developers and companies building their own variants of DeepSeek, but on DeepSeek. But and you made a very important distinction there. So if I'm a business, I might build an instance on DeepSeek for my business, and maybe I'm going to use it to do research and analyze my business data. But I'm not going to have that hosted, because then I cross a legislative line, especially if it's completely illegal. But I can still benefit from it, but I've got to be careful that my data's hosted with me in my environment, essentially.
I think that's the beauty of open source, right? You can choose who your host is. You can fine tune the model further, so you can overcome the sensor data ship that is embedded in the base model, and a lot of people fine tune and further train those models now with their own proprietary data set, which makes total sense, specifically if you talk about enterprise use cases. But yeah, you basically can choose where you want to host the DeepSeek model or any other open source model.
Yes, so you can then, as a technology department for an enterprise, you almost become an incubator for different models, and you pick the ones that are going to work best for the particular use case you have in mind. We've got some market data. I think we just got 2 slides today, haven't we, Thomas, that we were gonna take a look at. But maybe now's a good time to take a look at the market share by the likes of ChatGPT. Let me go to my share here. You should be able to see that. This is showing the variation on market share for the LLMs with enterprise customers. So showing that essentially how that market's changing between the players from 2023 and into 2024. So presumably DeepSeek comes along and disrupts this picture. Is that what we're kind of likely to see? But it won't eliminate any of the big players, but another one has arrived, and then you've got that dynamic around it being open source, but you can't host it. Sorry, you can host it. You can't have them host your data.
Yeah. So so what you have here is, and again, this is a chart before DeepSeek, I would assume, because it will change now. But you need to distinguish between who's a closed source player, with the likes of what you have here, OpenAI, Google, Anthropic. You cannot to my knowledge, host these large language models that they provide on a different platform, while you can do it with Llama on Meta, which is open source, or any other, or Mistral. Mistral offers an open source model as well as a closed source model. And you can choose. So many people now advocate for open source. We talked about Europe. I think it's the biggest opportunity for Europe in the AI market is to go after open source, but they're still wringing their hands. US companies, the big players, still trying to stifle or downplay open source. But many people believe the big breakthrough will be open source, and large language models will commoditize over time. And the big opportunity is on the inference part, on the app layer.
Shall we sort of double click on that as terminology? I mean, I'm working to give you a sort of sense of like knowledge of certainly the B2B sales community. If you get a group of B2B technology sellers together and say, hey, explain the difference between training and inferencing, you're gonna get some answers, but you're gonna get some blank looks as well. And I think if those that use the likes of ChatGPT just kind of day to day, they're much better because they've got that kind of day in day out experience of seeing a large language model actually inferencing, as in coming up with the answer. But you used another term, so I wanted to just break down. Let's just break down for the sales community out there: training, inferencing, and then we've talked about reasoning. But you've also used the term reinforcement learning. So shall we just try and unpack those so everyone's got a common set of terminology that they can use when talking to their customers, right?
Yeah, so let me give that a try. Just before I go there, just to emphasize, I'm now an independent consultant, right? So I don't have a dog in the fight. For the first time ever in my career, I thoroughly enjoy that I can look at the marketplace and choose for my customers best of breed, if necessary, mentor other people about what's out there, without having to push a certain product or a certain company or any of that. So I really enjoy to be unbiased for the first time in my career. But let me try to break down the question that you raised. So training a foundation model. And again, I use the term foundation model because foundation model is more encompassing than a large language model. Foundation model could be a multimodal model, or could be a large language model, or could be anything else. So this is based on the transformer architecture, as we call it, that was invented by Google several years ago. By the way, DeepSeek intentionally is not going after multimodal because Wang Feng believes that has nothing to do with intelligence. They're going after what's called AGI, artificial general intelligence, as the long-term, as the North Star goal. And they don't believe in that multimodal plays a role in that. They believe it's purely based on language, just as a side note. So training is the learning phase, right? You take one of these models, you feed the model with all the data that you can get a handle on, public data, of course. It adjusts its internal parameters. It's very computational intensive. That's why NVIDIA is, you look at the stock price because we need GPU chips for that. CPU chips will not do the job. So that's why it's very computational intensive to an extent where now Microsoft buys a nuclear power plant to power their future data centers. This is where we are going with all this, and maybe DeepSeek has an impact on that as well, and we don't need nuclear power for these data centers. But the result is a trained model. It's like building your brain, right? When we go to school and to college, we build up our brain with new information that we take in. On the inference side is where we make use of this knowledge. So when we come out of college, we get our first job, and we need to bring our learned knowledge to practice. So this is putting your knowledge to use when you give a model what's called a prompt, which we know as a question in a more simple term. Prompt engineering, by the way, is a discipline on its own, or a job description on its own, meanwhile. And we use this, and the models use this learned knowledge now to generate a response. So they not just regurgitate existing responses, they are capable, and that's generative AI and the concept of generative AI, they are able to formulate new context. And inference is faster, so you need less computational power, but you can make predictions, you can generate new content. You basically use your brain to think and create. Now, all this is based on different methodologies. So these usual models, these what I call dense models, these big models, are usually based on what's called supervised or unsupervised learning. Supervised learning means there is a human in the loop that provides constant feedback on the responses. Are they right? Are they wrong? And then the model readjusts accordingly. Reinforcement learning is without any humans in the loop. And again, as I mentioned, until now, some people doubt it. You can do that at the scale that we now see with DeepSeek, but DeepSeek proved everybody wrong, right? You can do reinforcement learning on that scale. You give model a bunch of data, not labeled data. You do not need to label the data as you need for the big models, and you give them a reward function. So basically, you give a reward and a punishment function into the model, and saying this is the right answer, this is the wrong answer, this is the right format, this is the wrong format. You give the model also a set of math code or logic instructions, and then it can do this kind of chain of thought thinking. But you basically decouple completely from the data limitation. So data are not a limitation anymore for the model in the reinforcement context to perform as well as the big models. And it constantly punishes this model for particular actions, and the model learns by itself. Basically, the model is now instantly capable of learning itself and growing without the human interaction.
So that's a really great explanation, Thomas. Thank you. So just to try and bring that to life then. So if I think about one of the episodes that I released of AI Outcomes, which was focused on AI agents in the customer services environment, because the customer services, just there's been so much development in generative AI, and lots of businesses now have their own chatbots that you can interact with. And I showed some video clips of Toyota and Lufthansa where their AI will actually call their customers, and they will actually have a voice conversation with them. It's not even chat on using a keyboard. They're actually talking to the AI. The AI will hand off and will hand off to have you now talk to the service, the Toyota servicing AI agent will hand off to the Toyota reinsurance agent, and Lufthansa just even handling whole new like flight bookings for people using their AI agents. And so those models are trained on the data from Toyota and from Lufthansa, just however much customer services data, calls, text, whatever they have. But what you're saying is really interesting, because you can train the model, and then from that process of what was it, reward and punishment, sounds kind of cruel, but never mind. But with reward and punishment, the AI is just going to get better and better. So it's not limited to your training data set. It's going to start learning, okay, all these thousands of calls that we're handling, this is how we offer a better service, a better outcome to the user. So is that a kind of like a, I know I'm talking in layman's simplistic terms, but I'm trying to like understand, what does it mean for a company who are using this, say, in a customer services environment, which lots of enterprise customers will be and considering, I guess.
Yeah, no, I mean, great question, right? So first of all, Mark Zuckerberg mentioned that we will see billions, I think he mentioned billions of these AI agents in the near future out there. And they will do all this mundane work that we hopefully get freed from. I know there is this discussion on, does it replace humans? Does it enhance humans? Does it take our jobs? I mean, there are many good and bad examples on that. I just saw a press release from an Indian startup company that introduced one of these AI agents for customer service. And unfortunately, as a result, they laid off 95% of their workforce because they didn't need them anymore. The AI did the job. So these are extreme examples that everybody is right or wrong scared of. At the same time, if we get freed up by these mundane, repetitive tasks, imagine what we can do in using our energy for more innovation going forward. So these AI agents, they collaborate with humans in the best case scenario, collaborate with humans, human users in multi-agent systems. They understand the user, they understand all the context around the problem in a form of a workflow. They structure the problem, and they interact with other domain agents. So in the best case scenarios, users don't even have to trigger the workflows anymore. They get triggered by themselves. So take examples like replenishment of inventory, supply chain disruptions, where you need a whole set of data, external and internal, in order to bring in and start working on the problem. The beauty would be if this all comes true in reality, that we humans can focus on strategic decisions and innovation. But we'll have to see. So I mean, the word is still out there. What will happen and how this all evolves. But I think we see a lot of these examples already happening today in form of these so-called AI agents in customer service. First and foremost, those are the bread and butter scenarios: customer service, summaries, marketing material, product descriptions. I have an ERP background. I'm more interested in the deeper use cases, where AI enhances these mission critical systems. But I'm fully aware that I think I saw 90% of companies use ChatGPT in one form or another, meaning either they paid for the ChatGPT enterprise license, then you become an official enterprise user. And I think they just reached the $1 million mark of paid users. But many companies do it probably in an unofficial way by people just going over to the ChatGPT experience in order to improve their LinkedIn post or their marketing material or their email before they send it. That's probably not counted as a paid enterprise user.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was actually trying to find how enterprise pay for OpenAI, for example. It's not clear. They're talking about cost per token, if it's generating or it's being used in a sort of augmented way to generate responses to your customers. You're paying per word, and everything's being referred to as being tokenized. And so it's very interesting to see how businesses are adopting that and those kind of decisions they'll then make about whether they achieve best value from which provider. It just is unclear to me how you make that evaluation right now. And then the other piece on that is looking at the episode I did around Microsoft Copilot, was how many pilots just get stuck in pilot. How much actually goes out into the wild and scales, and then the customer says, hey, we don't need so many staff, or we can release that outsource center in Bangalore. How many times does that not happen because we're stuck in the pilot phase because it's still, we just can't figure it out, or it's too risky?
So David Lincecum, which is a well-respected researcher out there, and he posts a lot of articles on LinkedIn. I think it was the chief strategy officer for Deloitte, or still is. I'm not even sure what he's doing these days. But he just posted a research article saying 80% of AI projects still fail.
Got it.
And they fail for two reasons, right? Because one is they are not planned out well enough, or they are successful in prototyping, but it's a whole different ballgame to put that into production on a 24/7 basis, right? So a lot of people still underestimate what it takes to make an AI project very, very successful. My friend Tony Gonzalez from TechTarget also issued a report recently after interviewing Goldman Sachs and KPMG and McKinsey, coming to the same conclusion, right? There's still so many projects out there that are not successful and don't show an ROI. But because you said on the token basis, in terms of inference, I just want to mention, because I have the numbers here, where DeepSeek completely disrupted the market, right? If you go to OpenAI, you currently have a price tag on $30 per 1 million token to get you answers for your prompts. Tokens are piece of a word, right? So all these language models, their currency is tokens, which is sliced up words in order for them to digest it. And in comparison, DeepSeek charges on the latest pricing $2 per million tokens. So that's a 30x difference. Again, this will have impact. This will have impact on the market. This will have impact. How can OpenAI or Anthropic or whoever else recoup the venture capital that is invested in these companies? So they now need to find a way to distinguish and differentiate. But I want to mention one other thing, Ben, as well, because when we talked about AI agents or leveraging AI in general in enterprises, I don't think you get very far by using any model off the shelf. In other words, as is, based on trained on public information and public data. What companies need to do, and what they're doing even more so now, but I wish there would be more examples out there in the marketplace, is fine-tuning. Or if you want, further train these models with their own proprietary data sets. If you take an OpenAI model or a Claude model, they don't know anything about your supply chain or your suppliers or your customers. So you need to retrain these models, make them understand the context of who are your customers, who are your suppliers, how does your supply chain work, what are my customer relationships, in order to bring the generic data and the proprietary data sets together and formulate a response that is detailed and relevant for your business. So this whole fine-tuning, there are different techniques how to do that, but that's an effort, again, in itself. It's part of the training process. It's computational, very intensive, and therefore very expensive, but absolutely critical if you bring AI into the enterprise context.
Yeah, and I guess especially if you've got a regulatory environment and compliance needs and privacy issues, probably all gets woven in, and that's what it's amazing, that stat. I think you said 80% of AI pilots just kind of almost stuck there. Yeah. And so governance, for me, having experienced, as I'm sure you have, many successful technology program deliveries and many unsuccessful deliveries, the governance around the fine-tuning you mentioned seems incredibly important, well, absolutely critical to going live with something this powerful once it's been trained on your organization's data, right? So setting up some guardrails and kind of risks around that the benefits seem really high, but the risks also seem pretty high.
I mean, if you want, we can talk about specific use cases where this is relevant and comes to the forefront, just so the audience understands better where I'm coming from and why these enterprise use cases might be very different to our kids using ChatGPT to do their homework. I mean, I honestly don't want to be a school teacher these days. I don't even know how they get by, because we know they all use ChatGPT. And they figured it out. So now you need to reinvent the kind of homework and the kind of tests and everything, basically, in this new world.
Yeah, my daughter came home yesterday and said that they'd had a chat with their head teacher saying, hey, this ChatGPT thing, use it for research all you like, but you cannot get it generating answers. And they were saying that the systems are there to spot the answers, and you can kind of spot a ChatGPT answer once you get used to it, can't you? But we did have a slide on use case, didn't we, for financial, I think financial sector. Would that be useful to share that with the audience now, Thomas? And
yeah, give me a chance to quick intro on use cases in general, right? Because there are some really stunning use cases out there in the enterprise context and outside of the enterprise context as well. So let me just, because I'm going back to Wales now again as well, before we go to the AI integrated use cases, which again I mentioned already is where I'm most interested in, and where I wish there would be more talk and more examples more examples out there, but they are coming. Many people believe that 2025 will be the year of inference in the AI context, because so far the focus was very much on the race on bigger models, more parameters in these large language models. Now that they become more and more commoditized, and DeepSeek certainly had an impact on that. My hope, and many people think now it's time to focus on inference and how to build the applications on top of these capabilities. Now, there are a lot of use cases that are just, stunning the world, right? You read them in different magazines. I'll just give you a few examples. I just read one for healthcare, right? So brain cancer, where they now, in the good old way, right? They had, it's sorry if it sounds a bit gruesome, but the surgeon basically opens your brain in order to determine while doing the surgery what kind of cancer you have, and then deciding how aggressive he needs to be on trying to remove the cancer cells in your brain. And there are many examples. I read this article and I was shocked where they did it wrong, right? They were either too aggressive, and there was one example where the patient lost motion, and afterwards it turned out that it was a mild form of cancer and he made the wrong decision, or vice versa. It's like determined quickly that it's a mild form, and not everything gets removed during the surgery, which is it's an hour-long surgery, right? And now they use computer vision, which is part of AI. They use computer vision to have a camera looking into the open brain during the surgery and telling the surgeon, right, not only quickly what form of cancer it is, but also how aggressive to be able to be on removing the cancer cells. And according to that article, the success rate went from below 50% to over 90% by using AI as an assistant for the neurosurgeon doing a brain cancer surgery. These are the stunning use cases that you now see what's happening out there. Another one is there was a prize money, actually. Somebody offered prize money, and I can't remember the organization, $700,000 if somebody is capable of deciphering the old script roles that they found during the Pompeii volcanic explosion. So they still have these old script roles recouped from the ashes. If they touch them, they just break apart, and they want to know what's written in them. So a student used AI to figure out how to decipher the writing in these script roles, and found out that they were written by the father-in-law of Julius Caesar, without even touching them. So, stunning. The student, of course, got the prize money, but it's stunning that these capabilities exist where you now, without touching a script roll that is hundreds and hundreds of years old, and decipher what text is written in them. And then the last one, of course, my favorite topic these days is whales. I don't know if you saw that, but there was, for the first time ever, at the institution is called SETI. I don't know what it stands for. There's the name for whales that starts with C. Anyway, it's in the Bay Area. For the first time ever, they had a 20-minute dialogue with a whale using AI.
Wow.
in Alaska, and it made big headlines. So they were able, with the help of AI, to create a model that basically collected the pings and the noises and everything from whales over many years, and they were doing it back and forth with a whale in form. They pretty much talk to them. So you see, it's amazing what the possibilities are. And then, of course, in HPE, where we met, we used AI for Formula One racing, right? What pit stops to make, when is the fuel stop the right, the aerodynamics for the new car, all these things are happening out there and are being used. But in terms of what's dear to my heart, real AI integrated use cases, you mentioned the slide that you have for the banking industry. If you bring that up, these are generative AI use cases. And I don't want to go into the details, but just for the banking industry, if you look at the number of use cases, the number of possibilities where AI now can have an impact in the banking industry alone, It's quite stunning. And we worked on a fraud detection use case in AI with a bank, and it's amazing, right? I mean, if you work on fraud detection using AI, you train the model with information like what device is being used, right? You want to log into your account, your bank account. Are you a fraudster or are you the real Ben? So first of all, it looks at the device that you are using. Is that a device you used before? Is this a new device? Where are you using it? Which location? Is this a location you live in? Is it a location you used before? Or is it somebody in Nigeria or Morocco that has never logged on to Ben Drake's banking account? This is just for starters, right? They know your IP address. I mean, they know, of course, they quickly get all these details. But then they go a step further. And then it gets really, really interesting. They measure your keystrokes. They know the speed of your keystrokes.
No.
Not only the speed, they know
they're slow. They're slow.
Know how exactly, and they compare that. Like if you are now if you are slow in the past, and now you're fluent with faster keystrokes, this is suspicious. They look at the pressure, how hard you touch the keys, either on a touch point or on your keyboard, keyboard itself. I mean, it's just the duration of it, how long it takes you to type in a word or to type in a text. They know all that. And they compare that with data in the past. They even look at how fast you move your mouse and compare it with you in the past. And based on this, and this has to happen instant in real time, right? Because you don't want to wait to log into your bank account. I mean, the fraud detection itself and that using in the AI context is really stunning, and it's a really complex use case. But the fact that they're using these kind of biometric data in addition to location and device data is that's the future. Yeah. And AI helps them to do what I described in absolute real time. And this is just one of, if you look at that chart, many of these different use cases that banks now use to improve their processes.
Yeah, and look, it's that you can draw analogies, can't you, between the brain surgery example that you used. It's the information is there, but the human either can't see it or can't act on it, as you say, in real time. So the AI, it's not just automating, is it? It's actually through, especially computer vision. And you introduced me to computer vision when you were going through the use cases in the session in San Jose. It's just phenomenal in healthcare and medical environments. But the information's there if only the human could see it. And the human can't have the conversation with the grey whale, but the AI can, because it can process all of that information and make sense of it. And so that for me is just, that was one of the big eye-openers for me, was that AI is not just clever automation. No, it can actually do stuff. And the keystrokes, I had no idea. I did not know it was the fraud detection capability of AI to that level. Yeah, it's just phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. And yeah, it's, as you were talking, I was sort of looking at these use cases, and they're all the way, and this is banking, right? This slide is, I think, is for financial company.
Yeah.
But it's across from all the way from acquiring new customers to then internal support functions. It's just everything, and it's not just automation. How are you seeing this change? Because everything's moving super fast, but how are you seeing the adoption of generative AI technologies by banking institutions to get to this sort of model of having these different use cases?
Yeah. So I mentioned before, right? ERP, enterprise resource planning, is the heartbeat of every company out there. That includes your finance systems, that includes your supply chain systems, your customer relationship systems. All these heartbeat processes, these mission critical processes, are part of an ERP system. So embedding AI capabilities deep into ERP, I think that's where the biggest ROI, the biggest outcome will be had in the future. There was a project with, since I'm in Mexico, Mercado Libre, which is, some people call it the Amazon equivalent of South America. They did customer acquisition. They distinguished the potential prospects of users into pursuable, loyal, unpursuable, and difficult. So four categories. And then they did what's called lookalike algorithms, which is similar to what Facebook is doing. And maybe they were the first ones who came out with that more than 10 years ago, these lookalike algorithms that basically compare a prospect with your successful customers and find the analogies. How do you use AI to approach these customers so that new prospects become part of your success stories or part of your successful loyal customers? And it's very sophisticated, right? I mean, I mentioned the biometrics. I don't know if they look at biometrics at Mercado Libre, but these processes, the speed and the accuracy was not possible until now in order to do it so sophisticated to acquire new customers. Another example, Zalando comes to mind, a fashion retailer. I wanted to look it up. I don't know if Zalando is a US or UK. I think it's in your back of the woods, UK company. But anyway, it's something they probably don't want to hear that when I say that, but it's one of these fast fashion retailers.
Sure.
But with some very ethical practices. So in their defense, they are different than the typical fast fashion. But the problems they are facing in this fast fashion industry is don't avoid overstock because of costs first and foremost, but also avoid understock. Right, and these are all highly discounted items. I think they have 1 million product in their portfolio, but they're all highly discounted, and they now need to figure out how can I avoid overstock, while at the same time making sure I have it available if customers demand it, and everything is seasonal. So imagine the scale of a problem like that you have to solve in order to basically avoid overstock, avoid understock, do the discount steering, right? What kind of discount do I give? While Zalando is very known for their hassle-free return policy, if you want. So when these returns come back, what's the residual value? And then compare that again with the discount, and then trying to optimize across your different departments and warehouses. These are the problems that AI can help solve. That until now, business intelligence or business warehouses, as we know it, were very limited to be able to solve that problem without a human, right? Because you look at visuals, you look at tables, you look at tons and tons of data, and then you try as a human trying to make sense out of that to basically accurately determine the discount. But I'll keep it short. But one of my favorite examples is in the supply chain optimization space, right? It's like where you basically, there was one company that took a model, fine-tuned it with their proprietary supply chain data, and then build a supply chain tower with the help of AI around that combined data set. And now in natural language, they can ask questions. How many of my shipments were delayed in the first week of May? And why? What was the reason? Was it the clearance? Was it the pick pack? Was it the docking? Was the train delayed or the flight delayed? And how can I counter that to avoid that in the future? I mean, and they look at weather data in addition to all their own data. I mean, it's this massive data set that you take into context, and then AI helps you to sift through and answer simple questions, give you a response in natural language. These are the shipments that were delayed. These are the reasons why. This is, in the future, how you can overcome inventory shortages by moving a warehouse from the US to, now we are in Mexico, to Mexico, or to replenishment across. Remember that big tanker ship that was stuck in the Suez Canal?
Yeah, got stuck. Yeah.
Ever given?
Something like that.
6 days, the Suez Canal was blocked by this big ship. And it was a complete disruptions across all supply chains in the world because that's how where your supplies comes from. Imagine you can just tell AI, or you don't even tell AI. AI finds out by itself
Yeah.
that the Suez Canal is blocked and instantly tells you what measures to take and what actions to take to overcome supply chain shortages. I mean, these are the use cases I hope we see more and more in 2025, because they go way beyond AI agents for customer service or summaries or questions and answers. They are the deeply embedded AI use cases in your mission critical systems.
Yeah, and the ability to instantly tell you what to do and to plan ahead and learn. Again, just phenomenal capability. Well, look, Thomas, we said we were going to talk for about 45 minutes, which about to hit an hour. It's been a really, really fascinating conversation with you, and I love the different use cases that you just bring to life. And the podcast called AI Outcomes for a reason. Is let's get focused on the outcome, not just the technology. So it's been a fascinating conversation with you, Thomas. Hopefully we'll have you on again. Where do people find you? You said you don't have a dog. You don't have a dog in the fight these days. You're independent, but where do people come to find you on social media?
Well, I'm certainly on LinkedIn. I'm on a private basis on other social media every now and then as well. If the wind is not blowing, you know that we share our passion for wind sports, and this is high season here in Baja California for everybody who's on the water with a sail. But yeah, find me through LinkedIn, or my email is thomas.odenwald@icloud.com. I can't believe we have already an hour, because I was hoping that we can talk a little bit about the geopolitical landscape as well. Maybe that's for a second podcast, because you are sitting in Europe. I'm originally from Europe. I had another stint last year with the altruistic mission to help Europe to come up to speed. But I'm worried. I'm worried on what's happening in the European market space when it comes to AI, and I hope in 2025 they find a way out and can compete on global level.
Yes, and so do I. There's so many great companies in Europe. Wouldn't it be a shame if they started suffering on market share just because they weren't able to adopt these technologies? And I think if you need a really healthy industry locally, so I hope that changes. That'd be a fascinating conversation to have, Thomas. So what we'll do is we'll get you back on for that conversation. But thank you for you have this ability to simplify. Clearly your knowledge is you can go to that level of granularity if you need to, but that ability to be able to talk at a business level and simplify is really excellent, and excellent for our audience here. So thank you very much, Thomas. And be sure to check Windfinder or Wind Guru before reaching out to Thomas. Check he's not out on the water. But yeah, cool. Well, look, it's been brilliant talking to you, Thomas. Thank you so much, and we'll see you again soon, no doubt.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Was fun, and happy to do more. I think it's all about storytelling in this space, and I learned that from somebody called Ben Drakes back in the days when he came out and was teaching HPE staff on storytelling within the sales department. I think it's important to get it into context. So hopefully it helped a little bit to understand what's happening in the marketplace. I'm not even claiming that I'm an AI expert, because that space is moving so fast. But thanks for the invite.
Yeah, no problems. No, I think it's really helped. And if people have questions, then just field them in the comments. And Thomas or myself will respond to you for sure. So look, thanks. Let's wrap it up there then, Thomas. Thank you so much, and definitely we shall see you again on the AI Outcomes podcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben. All the best to you in the UK. Take care.
You too. You too. Thanks, Thomas.